The following presentation is brought to you by the Realm Network.
Okay, here we are on the BDE, on the Realm Network. That's how I'm going to start every one of my podcasts. For everybody on iTunes, and I tell you this all the time, my friends on iTunes who are driving, listening to the BDE, I come in so close to the microphone, and that's for my producer, Mark, and I go the Realm Network. And I love this show because I say, just like on my YouTube show, the Build DeMott experience is about meeting people who have a story to tell that's interesting and it can be translated to everyone. And I love coaches. I love life coaches. I love coaches of kids, parents. I love people with positive messages. And we're talking, the thing for me lately, I've been talking about a lot on football with Miss Paula. We touch on it on Face Value with Casey. And we talked about the Will Smith movie, Concussion. And we talk about the NFL all the time. And we'll get into it with Miss Paula about the hits that have gone on and still the conversation that's going on there. But concussions affect more than just the football player, more than just the professional wrestler. And I talk to a lot of guys and girls about it like that too. But concussions play a big part in today's, I don't know if society is the right word, but in today's living, a lot of people have suffered head injuries. And you don't hear a lot about it because they're not entertainers, they're not professional athletes. And we're gonna meet a man today who's got not only a great story, but had instance with concussion that changed his life. And I don't want to go into it any farther before I introduce my guest, David Brady. Mr. Brady, welcome to the BDE and take it away.
Well, thank you very much, Bill. It's great to be here and great to be alive. Let me just say that for the record. And also, I had an opportunity to go watch Concussion. I don't know if you've seen it yet.
I haven't seen it yet, but it's on my to-do list. Yeah,
you want to see it because if Will Smith does not get nominated next year for this movie, there is no justice in the world. His performance is beyond belief how powerful it is. Really? And the irony of it is that in the middle of the movie, the tears started coming down my face. Because what happened is it brought back for me the experience, and you're going to see who I'm talking about, the football player who stands there pounding his head, going like, what's wrong? And very succinctly, which is not what I'm prone to do, is that in 2010, January 4th, so 6 years and 5 days ago, a mother asked me to speak to her young son. My original graduate work in the behavioral sciences, I went on. I mean, I've got quite a varied background, but I was being trained to be a therapist. I was going to work with alcohol and drugs, kids that had problems with that. I myself have been in recovery since I was 21, 45 years. If I make it,
congratulations on that. Congratulations.
Yeah, I'm very grateful. And what happened is that this young man, she hoped he was just an alcoholic, or she just hoped he was just a drug addict. But in truth, he had paranoid schizophrenia. And I had said to her, my instincts are, this is not a good idea for me to do this. But she said, please, he'll listen to you. And I happened to have been in Florida. I drove 30 hours up from Florida to Toronto. And I was exhausted when I got to that house, and I should not have gone in. But I went in and I saw him, and I could tell that there was something very wrong. He was very erratic. And I went into a room with him, and I said, look, whatever you talk to me about is sacrosanct between you and I. I'm not going to repeat it to your mother. It is like talking. He and I had gone to the same Catholic. I'd gone to the same school he did, De La Salle, right. Private school. And I said, it's like talking to one of the brothers of the priest. It's between you and me. And a dog came in, and I bent over to pet the dog. And the next thing I know, he hit me so hard. When they say you see stars, I literally only could see stars.
The kid you were there helping.
I was there to help him. And he was 6'2", worked out 3 hours a day by his own admission in a letter to me to control the voices in his head, who told him at that moment to kill me. And he jumped on top of me, pinned my arms under his legs, and proceeded to, it was between 6 and 7 blows. I lost count around 4 or 5, and then there were 2 more. And the first one was paralyzing. I mean, it hurt so much. The second one, I could actually feel my brain inside my skull. The third and the fourth, I went into shock, and I started to get very peaceful. And I looked up at him and I said, "What are you doing?" And there was nobody home. And the bottom line on it is that when I escaped, because I only escaped, thank God, because his sisters were there. One of the girls is very big. She rode for one of the universities, I believe. But the bottom line is that I got to a hospital, and they said to me when I walked in, because I left it, my hands were like this, shaking because of the shock. And I just ran from this house, literally, and got in a car that I had just driven 30 hours and tried to get to my home. And I had a house in the country, and it was 2 hours away, but I didn't make it. I had to go to a hospital. And they put me into the emergency, and they said, "Oh, my God," and they looked at me. And what essentially happened is, when you get shocked, when you get a concussion, you can't think straight. Your whole brain stops functioning. And that's how I connected to that scene in the movie where the football player's pounding, saying, "I need help." And I couldn't think, and it only got worse over the next 2.5 to 3 years. Because what happened is I went into hiding. I went to the hospital. They tried to get me to go in and stay under observation. Mm-hmm. They said, "Look, you've had concussion. We don't know how many you've had." Later on, a specialist, when they did the MRI, they did a 3D PET scan of my brain. They injected me with nuclear so they could see what was going on. They said, "Both your temporal lobes are seriously damaged." But what I did is I was so irrational that I went and hid because of post-traumatic stress. And then this is a whole other area about my childhood, because I survived the father trying to murder me when I was 12. And it's a story that would bring tears to the eyes of a statue. But I was blessed with a great gene pool of inner strength and inner core. And what happened is that PTSD just kicked in, and I did everything to survive. And it was over the next 18 to 20 months that the damage started to show up every day in every way. And I can give you an example. I was with my ex-wife, and I'm close to both my ex-wives, ironically. And first ex-wife takes me out to lunch. I park the car, we go to lunch. An hour later, I come out. It's not like, "Oh, geez, where did I leave my car?" I mean, there was no recollection at any level of where or if I had driven there. And fear came over me again like a tidal wave. And I understood at that moment what people with Alzheimer's must feels like. And it was incredible, the terror. And then I began to see a young nephew of mine. I'd known him his entire life. He was 17. I couldn't remember his name. And I would end up losing 80% of my memory. And what happened is I had so much production, because I also had an incredible career as a producer. I've written, produced, and directed over 130 primetime episodes of television for Discovery US, Smithsonian Channel, National Geographic. I produced movies for the Disney Channel, for United Artists with Francis Ford Coppola. I mean, I've had this incredible career. And I was also a professor at 3 universities. So I used to have a memory.
And this is all prior to the incident.
Well, all of that I was able to do prior to the incident. Once the incident happened, I couldn't remember my own name, never mind somebody else's.
And is that the first? I don't mean to interrupt you, but I'm listening to this, and I'm trying to. I want to understand. Is that your first concussion? Is that the first time you were diagnosed with a concussion?
Yes. And
it was that severe?
Yes. Because I had multiple concussions.
At one time, you can have multiple concussions. I'm an ex-football player. I wrestled professionally. I'm a sports entertainer for 28 years. I've suffered my more than my fair share of concussions, not to the extent that you received yours. And one of the subjects for me is, as I get older, what are the effects of it? But that's a different conversation. I think what's more important, just for me, and I want you to continue. I don't mean to cut you off, but you suffered multiple concussions on one attack.
Yes.
That brings us to this.
But every time, listen, concussion is a nice word for a brain injury. That's what the surgeon said to me. And he said, every time he smashed your face and skull, if I were to show you the pictures of my face, this part of my face wrapped around my ear.
Oh my God.
The top of my cranium was up about 1.5 inches. And this side, the lacerations were so deep. I mean, this young man was in the midst of a psychotic break from reality, working out 3 hours, like physique, 3 hours a day. He had to pump iron and tried to control the voices. And my head being on the floor, every time he smashed his fist, my head smashed into the hardwood floor. Guess what that is?
A concussion.
Yeah. So essentially, I said to him, well, how many could I have had? He said, between 4 and 7, depending on how much he really got you. And so in my case, but it took months for it to kick in at its most severe.
Yeah.
The truth is, it really, what happened is 2 years ago, right about now, I was introduced through a friend. In Canada, the psychiatrists treating our soldiers coming out of Afghanistan, who are the guys the same as the Americans, but we're in Afghanistan, you were in Iraq, and these are the guys getting blown up with the IEDs, and these are the people that are working. And
right.
I have a lot of experience in the Middle East because I did a series with the U.S. State Department, diplomatic security, and I can get off on a whole nother subject with you because I traveled all through those hotspots. The point is that when that started to kick in, the psychiatrist that was helping my friend, he said, you've got to go do this radical new, and I want to say anybody that's ever had a concussion needs to find the local practitioner, and it's called neurofeedback, N-U-E-R-O, feedback. And neurofeedback, they put an electrode on this side of my scalp, on that side of my scalp, on the top of my cranium, here on this side, both hemispheres, so your left and right hemisphere. And then one down here that grounds you. And it's the same electrical charge that an ECG uses. And the brain, using what's called systems theory, which ironically was my original graduate work in university, was the brain tells itself what neural pathways, neural receptors are damaged or blocked, and it finds an alternative route to work around. And I've had 95 sessions. And at number 40, I can remember the moment when I was sitting in a chair, and I'll jump for a moment. I went like that, and I felt the shift in my brain. And all of a sudden, the memory started to come back, and I started to be able to understand what had happened to me. And I began to calm down. And one of the unexpected benefits was post-traumatic stress from my childhood, because I had a dad that we lived in this beautiful home. I was raised in a very privileged background, but my father, who was was 55 when I was born, and he had PTSD. Only then, in those days, they didn't understand what it was. And of course, his manifested in alcoholism. And in spite of the fact he was a civic politician, remarkably successful in his chosen career in the insurance industry, and we lived in a beautiful home. I attended private schools. At the age of 12, standing on a stairway, he loaded a 12-gauge shotgun, named it at my mother and I, and pulled the trigger 3 times. So, I had such post-traumatic stress that it was defied description. It all evaporated when I did the neurofeedback. In addition to restoring my brain's functionality, I can't say that I've got 100%, but I bet you I have at least 80 to 90% of my function back.
That is, it's remarkable to, as you're telling this, I say story, not that it's a story, as you're sharing this, like the most real story I've had shared with me in a long time. I'm picturing, because you and I had a chance to talk before this interview, and we'll go back, we'll go to the books and the movies and the TVs and the music, because you've lived up until this point a fascinating life. And to listen to you so articulate and so like together, you would never think that you went through something that you're describing. So so one of the things for me, and I'm going to ask you this question, because to me, you're the expert of the two of us for sure. You're the expert on this. What's the number? Do you know the number? Have you done research on this now? How many people, normal, everyday people who aren't football players, rugby players, wrestlers, hockey, whatever people, because I think that general public believes that concussions only happen in sports, not in accidents, not in tragedies. And do you think that's why we can't get a grasp on concussions, because you just don't know who has this trauma?
Anybody that's ever been in an automobile accident, that has ever hit their head on a dashboard, on a window, anybody that has ever slipped and fallen in the winter and landed on the back of their head, anybody that's ever been in a fist fight in a bar when you're a kid, you know, people get disorderly, drunk and disorderly. Anybody that's ever been slapped hard by a parent as a child probably has experienced a concussion. And then it's in degrees.
Right. So do you think that's a term that's used loosely now, as, oh, he's got a concussion?
No, I actually don't think it's recognized at all. I think it's only being recognized now because of this movie. I think that people were subjected to them long before we had any knowledge or understanding of them. And you're only becoming aware now, and it's like smoking was. Everybody's sitting, my mother was the head of the anesthetic department of Sick Children's Hospital in Toronto and another hospital in the town I grew up in, and they would sit there smoking cigarettes. Nobody understood the severity and the impact that cigarette smoke would have, nor did they want you to, because naturally insurance companies, with all due respect, they don't want you to talk about concussions, because then they have to make settlements that are representative of the damage done to a human being. I shut my company down after 30 years. I had just started it up. I've been a producer for 30 years. I've been president of a very large company called Red Apple Entertainment. I had shut that. I resigned from that company, moved to the country thinking I would live the life of Riley. To get bored. I lasted 6 months, and I started up another production company in 2005. And by 2009, I had a series, 4 other productions, including Smithsonian Channel, the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, which is the largest public broadcaster in the world outside the BBC, much larger than PBS in truth, in dollars and cents. And I was producing out of Europe for France 5, Discovery Europe, Discovery International, Discovery US, Discovery Canada. And I had so much production that what happened is, in those 4 years starting up to it, my business kept doubling. First year we did a small series. Second year we did a series and a program, like a one-off documentary. I had done movies prior to that, but when I changed or made a decision that I would change the direction of my life, I stopped producing feature films because, of course, I ran into the Bolivian marching powder when I was a very young guy in Hollywood, and I was introduced to it, and that ended very quickly because not healthy. And the thing about it is, I chose not to live that life, to be in Los Angeles and to be crazy.
Right.
And I came back to Canada, where I was able to teach at universities, and I was able to also write and produce really intelligent television, which has become an oxymoron. And the fact of the matter is that at the end of that, between when I was damaged in 2010 and July 2013, so 2.5 years ago, I had to shut down temporarily, I thought, my production company. But I had so much production going from the head injury in 2010 that it kept going into 2013. And I had a 3 to 5 out of 10. In other words, I would go into a network. I'm the only that I know of Canadian pre-approved producer at NBC. So during this period, I was at NBC at all the meetings. They only had, the president was there, and there was only a small group of us, including mostly LA, that were allowed to be present at that network. But what happened is, I went from 3 out of 5 times when I would pitch 10 projects, I would get 3 out of 5 of them. And then I went through, after the injury, I went through 330 no's in a row.
Wow.
Nobody. And then I said to one of the people who used to work for me, that was the head of one of the major channels in Canada, I said, what's going on? You've got to be frank and tell me. He said, you don't have what you used to have. And he said, I worked for you, David. I've got 3 proposals. Yours is good. It's as good as anybody's, but it's not like what it was.
And were you aware of that until you were told? Were you in your mind, were you working the same as you always worked?
No, I was scared to death. I was scared to death. I knew that there was something really wrong. I mean, I actually can remember contemplating suicide. And that's the other thing that these guys all did. And that's what happens to these people who really suffer severe concussions. Yeah. Particularly, depending on what position you played in football. The guys that were just hammering every week. You know, I mean, you take a look at hockey. And you look at the kid, the Canadian kid, he's only had 3 and he's done. I mean, he is the best hockey player to come along since Wayne Gretzky, but if he has another concussion, it's over. I mean, this guy will be brain damaged to the point. And it's, you know, you can't keep doing that to yourself, because the damage, it does take time to show up in brain injuries. If you haven't got damaged by now, you're okay. I knew I was damaged. I was terrified, and I kept thinking, my life as I know it is over. And it was at that point that I said to 3 friends one night in a diner. One was what you would call an American Episcopalian priest. Yeah. He's an Anglican priest to me. My best friend, Dennis, who is a vice president of a very large telecommunications company, and an artist buddy of mine. And I was sitting at dinner, and I had no emotion about it. I said, look, I'm thinking of offing myself. And they looked at me and they said, what? And I said, I don't see any future. I said, I have to shut my company down. I can't, my brain won't work anymore. I can't think anymore. I can't think clearly anymore. I can't figure out, because I had overcome so much adversity as a young man. And I just never met a problem or an obstacle I couldn't overcome.
Right.
I was beaten. I was powerless. I was done. I was done. And I mean, I overcame alcohol. I overcame drugs. I overcame a father that wanted to murder me. I overcame emotions. I overcame these feelings of low self-esteem. I did so much work on myself. I thought, honest to God, I'm never going to get over this. And that's the moment at which my friend turned to me, and I never knew this. And he said, you know what? If you do that, you're being the most selfish human being. He said, my brother committed suicide, and it destroyed our family. And he never told me that. And he said, I've never told anybody, but you have no idea the pain you caused. And I have 4 kids and 4 grandkids. And then my friend who was the minister said, we need to help you. You don't want to do that. That's the point at which I went and got serious help. That's the point at which I really started. And I went to a friend who got me to specialists. And, you know, it was through, I call it the grace of God. And I'm not like a traditionally religious guy in the sense of, you know, I believe that there is a God. I'm not it. And that I was raised Irish Catholic, but, you know, I have no issue with that. But it just, something happened for me that gave me the grace to be able to make the move to get the help medically. And ironically, I got a doctor, a psychiatrist. I had to go to a psychiatrist, and then I had to go to a whole bunch of specialists. And what's weird, and that's what my book is about, the aging with dignity, living with grace. Here's the thing about it. Look, there is nobody on the planet, there's not one of us, that has ever, at any time in their lives, not confronted something that has blindsided us. Whether it's a marriage ending, an illness, a parent dying, a financial reversal, the end of a career, the end of a friendship. All of these things are traumatic, and they affect us all exactly the same way. And I don't think you would be human if at some point in your life the thought hasn't crossed your mind, oh, there's no point in living.
Right.
I mean, I don't think everybody has that, but I think the majority of people have that. And I think that at some point where men or women are confronted by these inevitable crises that come up, we have to find a way out. And what I found a way out through, and again, you know, I just found, because the psychiatrist, they put me on medication, and I had this whole attitude about medication because of my background academically, but also because I just felt that it was a weaker person's way out. What I didn't understand is my ignorance was just overwhelming. That medical degree I paid $50 for online had no validity at any time in any place. When I used to counsel people, oh, you don't need medication because they were depressed. I thought I understood it. It has nothing to do with mood altering or any kind of, if they're in some kind of program or they're not supposed to do anything. The doctor explained to me when he said to me in very harsh terms, I want you to shut up right now and listen to me. And he gave me a lecture that I heard loud and clear, brain chemistry. It has to do with a thing called, we all have a serotonin. And what happened with the brain damage is the serotonin had been removed from my brain, and I didn't have any, and I needed to get these re-inhibitors to upgrade. And I mean, these SSRIs have got a bad rap because of young kids committing suicide, which again, I'm part of the media. I know what we do to stories. I suspect, and anybody who's suffered a death of a child or anything, my brother's daughter died very young. So I know what it's like, but in the case of the majority of people, it was like somebody flipped a switch for me the day after I took it, and my brain started to work. And that combined with the neurofeedback allowed me to survive. But it was, this doctor also got me on medication and had me pray. And I said, come on. And he said, no, I want you to follow me. And he was Irish, and he was the funniest guy. He said, if you'll use prayer and medication, your life will improve. I said, you're kidding. And he said, no. But he said, it's positive. It's positive affirmations, acknowledging that we need help. And that was the beginning, and that's why I used the 8 steps of the mastermind. I attend a thing called Unity, which is a very non-traditional, very positive. It integrates many religious and spiritual beliefs, and it's the best of everything. It's like a smorgasbord of spiritual values. And that's what my books are about, how I utilize the 8 steps, which, by the way, was created by the late great, inspired by Napoleon Hill in Think and Get Rich. This minister had utilized his principles of the mastermind. When 2 or more are gathered, you can get help. So you're with like-minded, positive people that empower us to move ahead. Regardless.
Surround yourself with it.
Yeah.
Now, is it so? I'm just like I'm soaking it all in, and I'm thinking to myself. The first thing I'm thinking to myself, and I'm gonna be like, I guess, brutally honest, is I don't know if I could do what you did. And I say I don't know because I I've spent a couple mornings. You spend a couple, like you said, everybody has those moments of, I don't want to do this anymore, or this and that. And recently my family has suffered a major loss and all these things that go on. But we talk about these concussions and the brain and people's, that's why you and I are talking today, because you have been through it. You had one of 2 decisions to make, and listening to you talk about the positivity and surrounding yourself with positive like people and doing these things, because it is very easy to understand if you would have said, thank goodness you didn't, by the way. I'm very happy that you didn't. Thank goodness that you've survived it. How you survived it, I can only listen and appreciate the story. But the fact that that's why I wanted to speak with you today is because your message, from what I'm getting just from this part of this, is that there's more for us, and if you look for it, but you need. I'm going to be all over because you have my brain really, and I don't mean that comically. You have my brain thinking about a million things right now, but you have to be ready for that, and to hear how you got to the point where you got the help. And then I'm just fascinated that you've written 2 books and are working on more projects when literally a short 6 years ago,
I was done as dinner.
Done as dinner. But to watch you and talk to you and listen to the story, I'm thinking, keep it coming. Tell me. I want to know about the books. Because you're telling it from life experience. There's people who write books who have an idea. Do you share that with the childhood trauma? Do you share your story in that book fully?
Yes, absolutely. And here's the thing. Look, I once had a person say to me, like, are you not ashamed of what you did? And I said, here's what I know about life. If you haven't thought about doing what I've done, you've probably done it. Right. And you don't want to admit it. But none of us are all that different. It has nothing to do with our backgrounds. It has nothing, it's biology. We function 90% of the time out of biology. What separates us from the animal species is the gift that we were given by whatever the creator of the universe was, that we have consciousness and we have values. And within us, though, is the biology driving us forward. And we have very simple, basic drivers that every single one of us has. And the difference as we evolve as spiritual or human beings is that we evolve to a place where we can manage these impulses the majority of the time. Nobody's perfect. I don't care who you are. I got news for you. The Pope isn't perfect, and I'm liking this guy. It's the first time I've liked the Catholic Pope in a number. Well, that's not true. But this guy I really like. I mean, this is the last great hope the Catholic Church has, I think, of surviving, is this man, because this man is truly spiritual and truly, I think, a representative of what the whole message of the original form of Christianity was.
And more realist than anybody else.
Yeah, and encompassing Judaism, by the way, which is, everybody keeps forgetting Jesus was a Jew, not a Roman Catholic or anything else. And this is a whole other area that I've spent a lot of time on, producing a lot of shows about and all those things. My books are incredibly, one of the great fears I had was, now look, I have a background, I have a master's degree in screenwriting. I've produced and I've had written and had produced 60 scripts. Some feature, some television, some drama, some, I do a lot of docudramas because that allowed me the opportunity to have intelligent television. I did the Counterforce with the U.S. State Department that aired in September 2001, and the story was on the World Trade Center, and the agent from diplomatic security looked into the camera and said, I know they're coming, we don't know when, and they hit 1 week to the day. And, I mean, that was prescient and bizarre. But, I've been privileged to be able to meet the most remarkable people. I did a show called The Pagan Christ that basically deconstructed the whole myths and everything around. I'm a Roman Catholic. And Tom Harper was a Rhodes Scholar and an Anglican, an Episcopalian theologian, and an Anglican Episcopalian priest ordained, 70 years old, said, look, we need to re-examine the basis of Christianity. And I mean, I got hammered by the majority of evangelical fundamentalists. And then I went and did it. They challenged me to do a show on that subject, which I did. I said, I'm happy to. I'm not out to destroy one's faith. But I said, you've got to be intelligent about it. Because what was said 2,000 years ago, if you don't understand the genesis of it, where it came from, and that we adopted all of these rituals and, I'm Catholic, and the Vatican sitting on top of a Zoroastrian temple. I mean, they just incorporated all these things. So I can go off on a million different subjects with you about how we need, and as human beings, we have faith. I did a show on life after death with Tom Harper that went for 10 episodes on Discovery US. And so all of these subjects were subjects that I was able to assimilate and be able to punch out. When I came to my books, the only thing I could do was write my personal story and share the experience of what happened to me, combined with the empirical knowledge I have from 30, 40 years ago in graduate school, when I also did a master's in behavioral sciences before I went on to do the other one. So all of that to say, life is hard a lot of the time, and we need tools to deal with it. And the 8 steps of the mastermind principle created by the late Jack and this minister were the principles that I could encompass and incorporate, because they said I'm powerless. I was powerless over my brain. I could not, I needed help. That I had to come to believe that there was something greater than me, that I could ask for help and get it. That I had to be willing to let go of these old ideas. And the old idea was the one that I sat there thinking I should off myself. That's not a healthy idea. That I had to then ask for help to change, to let go of that belief, and to disregard beliefs I heard as a child, particularly having grown up in a violent alcoholic home. I had so many messages that were unhealthy that my father, in his ignorance, because intergenerationally, we pass these things on to our own kids. And we don't mean to, but that's what we've heard. And so in my case, I incorporated the 8 steps of the mastermind in all my books. Everything I write now is on the mastermind, because it really works, because it sets people up to form small groups of like-minded people that support us in achieving our goals. And the goals that are worth achieving are, in my case, look, I spent the first 20 years of my career getting. I got a place in New York. If you ever saw the movie Scarface,
yeah,
I lived in that apartment in Manhattan. Okay, I lived in a beach house in Malibu. I had a house that was on the cover of Architectural Digest in Toronto, and I had a beautiful home on the ocean in West Vancouver. That was the first realization when I was suicidal. We were nominated for the Golden Globe exactly, oh my God now, 1983. And we had just produced this movie. We were working, Francis Ford Coppola, Zoetrope Studios presented the movie, United Artists distributed it. I was working actually out of George Lucas's building the Egg Company at Universal Studios. We were nominated, and I'm thinking, how is this possible that I feel so horrible? And then I realized, and this is the point, if I can make no other point, I want to make this one to you, that every single challenge and difficulty I have ever faced in my life, I have never learned anything on a good day. But every time I've been jammed into a corner, found myself at an impasse, or experienced emotional trauma or incredible hurt and pain of losing 2 marriages, of losing a wonderful relationship that I had, they're gut-wrenching, they just debilitating. It's always been the catalyst for the greatest change in my life. If I hadn't experienced those moments, I wouldn't be where I am today. And I would not know what I know today, and I wouldn't be able to help others. And what I have discovered and uncovered is that true happiness is a byproduct of being of service. I write my books to try to help others because I was given a gift.
Do you feel, golly, I'll tell you what, I don't like the word inspiring, because I feel like that's used, everybody can throw that word out. To me, it's like the word passion. Everybody says they have passion, and I'm inspired because and I agree with that with so much, but the last part is being of service and to help others. Do you feel that, going back a little bit earlier, do you think that the biggest problem or issue that we're talking about is people won't ask for help?
One of them, absolutely.
Is because it's not when it's not manly for men to ask for help. It's not pride and I can do this on my own. Do you think that that's the biggest? So do you cover that? Do you talk? Because I want to, for everybody on iTunes who's not watching this on the Realm Network, and everybody who's catching up and just tuning in, I'm talking to David Brady. And David is fascinating. The before and after story. The main topic of today was concussions and how it's dealt with every day. But the before and after story from Mr. Brady is fascinating, and we're catching up to the results of people who need coaching and the people who coach. I think that's the more important message for me of all the things that I've said. You've been through it, and now you want to help. You want to service your thing, and the small groups is fascinating to me, and everything else. And of all the things you've accomplished, all your accolades, would you say this is your time?
Yes, I can feel it. It shifted. It actually shifted in the last 90 days. That's the irony. A house I could not sell for 2 years has sold. I'm back in Vancouver where I want to be. Well, I'm sitting in Puerto Vallarta right now, but I'm back in Vancouver. The book just won the Aging with Dignity. Shocked me. I won it's called the People's Favorite Award. It's a very large 4,000 entrants. I was up against New York Times bestsellers. And I mean, I want to tell you, this is not, for the intelligentsia, when they read this book, they're going to go and blow it up.
Right.
Because, you know what? I wrote my television shows. And by the way, my shows averaged 100% higher than any other show on the network when put up in the same time slot. And I wrote it, if you had a grade 7 education, or a 7th grade, as you would say, you could understand what I'm saying. Because I have a vocabulary that if I chose to, I can utilize in a way that will leave most people sitting, scratching their heads.
Right, go way over their head.
What's the point? What am I trying to do? My ego's kicked in and I'm trying to impress somebody. No, that's not the name of the game. The name of the game is, what can I share with you? When I say to you, it's gut-wrenching. When I say to you that I felt that I had nothing to live for, that's much better saying than my maladaptive behavior put me into a non-homeostatic state where I felt that there was no purpose in living. You know, first of all, they're sitting back on, what the fuck is that? Pardon me, what is homeostasis?
You're fine. It's real. That's where we are. We're on the Realm Network. I love it.
Yeah. So my point is that it's getting real. People don't ask for help. They don't want to ask for help. They're ashamed. They feel less than. They feel embarrassed. They feel humiliated. I felt humiliated. I felt that somehow I had done something wrong. I didn't realize that this person was mentally ill, and I harbor no resentment or anger at him. I feel sorry for him. I'm angry. I'm not even angry at his mother. I'm disappointed that she was in such denial that she put my life at risk.
Right.
And then, and that's all I want to say about that, because it's in litigation, and I don't need to say any more about that. But it's disappointing to me that I had to experience something because of someone else's, and essentially it's selfishness. It's they don't want to be humiliated and embarrassed that their child is mentally ill. Instead of recognizing, hold it, my child's mentally ill, I need to get him help. So they were incapable of getting that child help when it was suggested to them, because they felt that as someone with a lower academic standing, without the training that a psychiatrist would have, could fix them.
And so worried about, but that's the generation that I think I grew up in, and probably my folks and people. That was the thing. You don't want to let anybody know you have problems or issues. You have to handle everything yourself. And
there's a way to really end your life prematurely and bring on stress, anger, remorse, resentment, and bitterness.
And by the time you're 50, like I am, I'm not, but there's people who are miserable.
Yeah.
And life is negative, and that's what I want more than anything, is for people to get away from that, especially my kids. And because I'd say we're a pretty positive household, and I have a 7-year-old boy, and trying to get him to understand the things that, one, I wasn't taught. Not that my mom didn't take great care of me. I love my mom. But the things that she knew are different than the things I know now. And then we have to pass that on. And I think it just comes to terms with, you can be a man's man. I consider myself a man's man, but know when you need help. And especially when it comes to your mind, your person, your inner being, and things like that. Yeah.
And that's an important part and an important point to remember. And it's the key for people to get better. And by the way, both my books, the Aging with Dignity, Living with Grace, and my Healing Childhood, Transforming Childhood Trauma, 8 Spiritual Steps. My whole point is I give you a blueprint to how to live and it's a very simple 8-step blueprint to how to overcome adversity, find peace of mind, and real purpose in life. And that's why I write what I do.
And these books are available on Amazon, correct?
Amazon. I had them out with a publisher, a wonderful publisher out of Texas called Virtual Bookworm. But the point is, the majority of them sell on Amazon, and it's easier for me to manage Amazon and Kindle. They're available in both.
Yeah.
And in truth, I need to now. I've had the exclusive on Kindle on the one. I have to do the other. We'll just end the Healing Childhood Trauma, and I'll put them out where people will be able to get them in bookstores. But I'm right now. I'm in the middle of writing Sex for Boomers, and
Sex for Boomers.
Sex for Boomers. And I was looking for somebody here, part of our for some research, but I haven't. It's actually, it's about relationships. And really, it's a book about relationships with sex sells. And it starts off with the very humorous first story of my first encounter at 16 at my best friend's house. You want to tell this story?
Please tell the story.
I end up with the most beautiful girl in the neighborhood who's 16, and I have no idea why she picks me. At this point, I am so insecure and think I'm skinny. Like, you're a big guy, right? I was so skinny. Listen, I had to run around the shower to get wet. You know, like I had one stripe in my pajamas. I mean, I'm talking skinny. And I was so humiliated. I would always wear long sleeve shirts in the summer because I was so thin. However, this girl takes a shine to me. And there we are, the night comes, we're over at my best friend's house. This is my best friend, and I'll send you that show, by the way, but you can't show it to anybody.
Okay.
You'll go to hour 3, and you'll see Johnny Brower. He's the one that brought John Lennon to Toronto. And with Eric Clapton and Klaus Wurman, and and he goes out, he doesn't tell me, I'm in there, I'm using his bedroom. And I'm having the time of my life. I'm getting there. It's all going to happen. And all of a sudden, the door opens, and I hear Johnny. And I said, it's his mother. And I said, no, help. I said, no, Mrs. Brower, it's just me, David. She flips on the light, and I hear, ah! Bang, the head hitting the floor from fainting. And I'm thinking, am I going to give this up? No, because I'm down there. And she comes to, and I hear, ah! And bang again, twice in a row. And the young lady I was with said, let's get out of here. And we ran home. Well, she got up, Hilda gets up, calls my mother. My mother's waiting for me at home with a broom. I'm 16, takes the broom to me. The next morning, as God is my witness, grabs him by the ear, and off I go to the local parish priest, where I say, bless me, Father, for I have sinned, and God, I want to do it again. And I did not see the hand coming that cuffed me off the back of the head.
Oh my gosh. And that's how your book starts?
That's how it starts. And then you wonder why I had a trauma the rest of my life.
Oh my God. You know what? I might have to talk to my mom because I'm sure I got a few backhands for things. That's tremendous. So for everybody on iTunes, I want to get this out there too. DavidBradyCommunications.com is where you can pick up the books as well, right? You can order the books through your website.
And you can go to David Brady Productions. Or you can go to davidbradybooks.com. I mean, it comes up under my productions website, but if you go to David Brady Productions or that one right there, that's the specific email that'll take you to the 2 books
that
are available right now. And there's also short videos, very short, 2 minutes and a 5-minute one, and they explain the mastermind principles. I
think when you're ready to do your next documentary, I think you need a 340-pound guy to tag along, because I think I'd have the time of my life.
You would have.
Just amazing. So I want to touch on some of the projects you're doing now, but I found it interesting earlier, and because concussions are in the back of my mind as a coach, we have that rule now in professional wrestling or sports entertainment, they call it now. And you have a tie to wrestling that I want to talk about as well. But that's the rule, the general rule now, because everybody's going into this protocol and finding out these head injuries from the older guys and how guys are living when they're 60 plus and how their bodies have changed and how their mental capacity has changed. There's a thing, like you said, in hockey, the young kid who's 3 and out. We've had a few young guys and girls, 2 and 3 within a year or something like that are wrecked, and their career's over. Do you think, while it ends someone's career, the bigger picture is we have to take care of these athletes? You have to, because you're going to end their lives, as witnessed by the numbers of suicides in the National Football League. Yeah, these guys were going out, and they were also going out and killing people. They would get insane. There's a few cases of that where they would go off the deep end and get into situations where altercations. The problem is that you can't. The headgear and they've improved everything so dramatically, and they need to protect them. My young grandson plays plays football he lives in Nashville, and he's 10. So you got to watch out, because the brains are small and they're developing, especially in young kids. So we just have to be careful. And in a perfect world, I would say there's no tackling at that age, and there shouldn't be in hockey. There should be no slap shots coming when you're until you get to bantam level, because you get whacked in the head with a puck. All the things we know now. My boy's 7 and loves football, and he's a big 7-year-old, and he wants to play football, but he's a great baseball player for his age, and that's my fear as someone who came up playing football and a little bit of college and then wrestling pretty much my whole life, is that I fear the things that we know now was the thing that my mother was worried about when she let me. Is he going to get hurt? And you don't know how hurt you are right now. No, that's right. And that's the insidious thing about concussion. You don't know how hurt you are. It doesn't show up immediately. Yeah. It takes, in some cases, years to evolve. I think this is a conversation, and as the movie builds momentum, I think there's a conversation we're going to have for years, and it's not just athletes. And for sharing that part of your life with me, I thank you so much, because I think it's important. There's roofers that fall off the roof and get a concussion. There's, everybody under the sun, these hoverboard kids who are falling down, concussion. Yep. Kids are playing in the street, wiffle ball, concussion. And it's life altering. If it's untreated, it's life altering. And there's families at risk. I've watched some of the NFL documentaries of the older players, and the families are at risk just as much as the people who have suffered. Because of the emotional and physical trauma associated with brain injury when they lose it, when they turn into rageaholics, when they get violent. And that's there is a correlation between brain injury and anger. And it's not their fault. It's a byproduct of the injury. And that's shown in the movie. You'll see when he keeps punching through one of if I'm not mistaken, one of them, the wife talks about that they're terrified of him. So in your opinion, and I say professional opinion because your background speaks for itself, you're more than an intelligent man. You your list of things you've done is tremendous. Do you think we're doing enough, or is this something we have to do?
We have to do more.
Have to do more.
Thank God for Will Smith. Like it is, because it needs to be taken care of. You know, it's the insurance companies, so many physicians don't know anything about it. They don't understand it. They just dismiss it. They just dismiss it. Oh, well, just a concussion. No, it's a brain injury. Concussion is another word for brain injury. That's what
that's a lot of that comes from, you get a concussion, take the next week off, and that's the end of it.
Yeah, no idea about the long-term consequences. And it was through that doctor who started to look at what was happening to the brains themselves and the damage on the blood vessels and all of the connections to it, how the brain started to disintegrate, and how the temporal lobes, how the cerebral cortex, neocortex, those parts of the brain that affect our logic, our emotions, and our thinking get damaged. And then essentially it's like think of your computer. I have a hard drive, it's damaged, and just reloading the software isn't going to fix it. The motherboard's gone. When your motherboard goes, that's when it's over.
Right. You just can't upgrade it and move on.
You got to do a lot of work.
Fascinating. I truly appreciate I use the term, I love people who drop the knowledge, come on the show and drop the knowledge, and just fascinating. But I want to shift gears a little bit, because I'm going to come to Canada. Lance Storm, my friend, would love to hear that. He's a 100% born and bred Canadian, and I told him I'd never come there. I'm coming to be your sidekick on your next project, because I fully believe it'd be the most life-altering experience I've had. But tell me quickly, and I told you earlier, I watched this because truly you're fascinating. Everybody please just visit, let me put it up there again. Go to the website, davidbradycommunications.com. You'll see where the books are available, but you read about Mr. Brady, what he's done, and Google him. That's my big term on the BDE is Google my guest. Watch the YouTube. It's fascinating. I find this interview more fascinating than anything. But I want, if you could, please share the story about how you met the Beatles.
So my best friend and I,
which is totally off subject, but I'm just fascinated by you met the Beatles.
We were 16 years old. I was at a Catholic private school called De La Salle Oaklands. My best friend, John Brower, was at Upper Canada College, which is this very, very, very exclusive private school. Now, his uncle and godfather was the former Prime Minister of Canada, John Diefenbaker. And he and I were the only two private school kids. We were the only two whose mothers were divorced, and we were the only two that had motorcycles, because our friends' parents were finance ministers, or there was a family, there was a chain of stores. They were the wealthiest family in the British Empire. They were acquaintances. At one point, they were sort of friends. We all went to school together. Anyways, John and I were driving down this main street in Toronto. And if you've never been to Toronto, you have no idea what you're missing. And if you've never been to Vancouver, you haven't seen the most beautiful city on earth, bar none. And so we're driving down Avenue Road. We see this car. It's 64 would have been, or 65. So I'm either 16 or 17. And we see this Cadillac with this police escort. And it goes into Upper Canada College. I lived down the street from it. John lived the other way down the street from it. And that was the neighborhood I grew up in. And we followed it in our motorcycles. We pull up, this police escort stop. He gets off his motorcycle. I'm sitting there with a BSA it's all, you saw the picture of it, right?
Yes, sir.
Bars on it. Like, this is not a private school kid. That's why the bikers didn't peep over me. And I'm sitting there, and the guy says, "You get out of here." And John Brower goes, "You get out of here. Look at my jacket." And it says right in the back, Upper Canada College, and that's where we are. He said, "Do you know who my uncle and godfather is?" "Oh," he said, "it's John Diefenbaker. I want your number. Give me the name of your badge." And the guy turned as red as your hat, the cop. And then the doors opened, and out got John, Paul, George, and Ringo. And they were changing cars to be snuck into the hotel and to have a decoy car take them off. And John Brower puts his bike on the stand, walks over, he says, "John Lennon, John Brower, we're going to work together one day." George Harrison walked over and he said, "Oh, I love your bike. Is that a BSA?" I said, "Yeah." And that BSA was very special. I mean, I had what's called Wall Phillips injectors on it, the first fuel injectors. And I mean, it was fast. It was crazy fast. And the compression was so high, and I was so skinny, I couldn't kick it over. I tried it once, and it fluttered me over the handlebars. So I used to have to run down the street and jump on it in second gear.
And pop
it. We start talking, and we were so dumb. At that moment, we didn't say, oh, by the way, can we have tickets to the show? We just got talking to them. And John Brower said, look, I'm going to do rock and roll shows, and I'd love you to come, John. And Lennon said, I bet you I will. 3 to 4 years later, and you can probably YouTube the Toronto Rock and Roll Revival, and you will see John Lennon on stage with Eric Clapton, Klaus Werman, Yoko in a bag, going, ah, and people going, woo. But Lennon, at that moment, turned to Eric Clapton and said, I don't need them anymore. And he was talking about the Beatles, and that was the end of the Beatles.
And that was the end of the Beatles.
1969, less than 6 months later, they announced the disbandment of the Beatles as a band.
And so I can imagine, we just hung out with the Beatles. Yeah, whatever.
We did this amazing series called Yonge Street Toronto Rock and Roll Stories that Netflix wants to pick up, but it's still under license to the Canadian broadcaster that doesn't want to release it yet, and I don't blame them. The critics went insane. I mean, we have 3 pages in the Toronto Star, which is the New York Times of Canada.
Right.
The Globe and Mail, full page is the New York Times. The Toronto Star would be the LA Times. And I mean, the National Post, which would be like, what's the big financial, the Financial Post in the US, what's the one? I can't remember the name, but they gave us 4 pages. I mean, the show is so amazing. And I'll send you a copy if you promise me on the air that you'll never distribute it to anyone.
I absolutely promise.
Okay, I'll send it to you. You'll be dumbfounded. And what people don't understand is the history of rock and roll. Robbie Robertson from the band.
Yeah.
So my best friend and partner that's sitting in the back of the car just was nominated last month in the United States for the release of the basement tape Bob Dylan and the band, and Jan and I, he's the Grammy. So that was just done with my best friend, and he's another one of my partners, and we've been friends for 40 years. But our whole lives, honest to God, I have had the most blessed life you can imagine. And I just keep ending up with people like John and Jan, and I just keep ending up with these incredible people who are so talented and so amazing. And Jan got me involved in Yonge Street. He came to me and said, look, let's do this show. And we did it with Duff Roman, who is the former president of the Chum Music Group in Canada, the largest radio station network in the country. And Duff was my hero as a kid because he was the DJ in Toronto who was the king of DJs. It would be like going back to Wolfman Jack.
Oh, man.
Who I knew through Dick Hug, who was a big XERB in LA when we were teenagers in LA. John Brower was in business with Dick Hug, who was on big XERB with Wolfman, and we'd go out to the studio and, hey, baby, get your Wolfman Rojo. I mean, we were just there.
Unbelievable.
We didn't know any of this was going to happen. Like, we did not know that the things we were doing or we were involved in would end up being,
That's so cool. That's so, right? It's so corny for a 50-year-old guy. That's so cool to hear this and I love for what it's worth, I love your persona, your personality. Everything is positive. There's not, because you could have went the other way, and you talked about it earlier, you could have been the most negative son of a gun I've ever talked to and ever met. And you could force that on other people and turn them negative. And you've taken everything in your life, the good, the bad, the cool, and now you're sharing it and you're helping other people. And that's what the biggest part of the Bill DeMott experience for me is, meeting fascinating people, great, tremendous sense of humor, and the stories that you're willing to share, because in those stories is a message. And that's what I want to thank you for today in your time, is the message. And I always say to everybody who does these podcasts with me, I want, if you don't mind me putting you on the spot, I want you to leave everybody here on the BDE and on iTunes and SoundCloud and everybody who's tuning into this drop the knowledge one more time. Leave us with that message, because you're a public speaker. You do so much. I think we'd have to have about 4 shows to fit it in. But if I'm your audience and the BDE is your audience, and I'd love to hear how you want us to attack life in 2016.
Just remember, you're not alone, that we all face adversity, and adversity is a gift to you from God or the universe to help you grow to be the person you should be.
That's it. That's all I need. I don't know who else. Hey, everybody on the beat, I don't know what else you need, but that's it. Please, I cannot stress enough. Please go visit davidbradycommunications.com. Google this man. You'll find some of his stuff on YouTube. Fascinating. Get the books. They're available on Amazon. Aging with Dignity and Grace, Transforming Childhood Trauma. Is that right?
Yeah, 8 Spiritual Steps to Reclaim Your Life. That book has, there's other Transforming Childhood Trauma, but if you put David Brady, Transforming Childhood Trauma, that should bring it up. But if not, it's 8 Spiritual Steps to Reclaim Your Life.
And
it's written for people who came out of alcoholic or dysfunctional families. I try to put the fun back in dysfunctional.
Yeah, I'm a big, I personally think I have the best sense of humor in the world. So I love when fun's part of anything.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I mean, you can sit around and mope out about it or recognize it.
Yeah.
I'm dysfunctional. My family could have been in the dictionary.
Oh man, I tell you what, it'd probably have a double picture because it'd be my face right next to it.
Here's my point. We all are. We all, everybody, you're human. We're so imperfect. We are perfectly imperfect.
But we're going to be okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and if we want to be okay, we're going to be okay.
We're going to be okay. And you know, did you ever see the movie Lord of the Rings?
No, I've never seen it. No.
Have you ever seen The Hobbit?
No.
You haven't, eh? Well,
my daughter's a big into all that stuff.
Yeah. Well, in the movie, there's this redheaded dwarf who goes into battle with his sword. Okay, his evil twin brother lives up here in this noggin, and instead of leading him into battle of strength, he gets up in the morning at 5 in the morning ahead of me and says, "Well, Dave, today you're screwed. You know it's never going to work out. Hurl yourself off the nearest time building, or do that. Go blow that situation up." And what I do, and I think we all have that little toxic dwarf in our heads, I just thank it for sharing in the morning so you can have the day off.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I'll handle it from here.
Yeah.
Fascinating. Mr. Brady, I can't thank you enough for your time.
Well, thank you.
I appreciate it. I look forward to another conversation in the future. Everyone, please go, and I'll talk about this on the BD forever. Go check out that movie, Concussions. It's eye-opening. More importantly, for everyone who doesn't realize it's not just in sports, watch this over again. Listen to it on iTunes. Share this with your friends and family, because it's after this conversation, it's very possible you know someone who's going through this. So share that message with everybody. Mr. Brady, thank you so much for being on the BDE today.
Well, thank you. And if I could, I'd be happy to post this on my website, which gets a fair amount of traffic.
Absolutely. You will get this link as soon as we go to air. I will send this to you, and I'll be awaiting my special thing that I will not share with the public.
Not share with anybody. I'll send it to Steve and tell Steve he can't send it either.
You got it. Done deal. Mr. Brady, I appreciate you and all the conversation. Happy New Year. I wish you so much more success in 2016, and I'll talk to you really soon.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Everybody at the BDE, what a conversation we just had with David Brady. We started off talking about Will Smith and the movie Concussion. It led us to outside of sports and what this is really about. And not a better person could have shared that message with us today. So as I say, this is what the Build DeMott experience is about. If you go to my YouTube page, it's at youtube.com/the Build DeMott experience. I go out and film days with people who are leading people. I want to meet the coaches. And here on the network, on the Realm Network, that's just what we did today. We met David Brady. He's a coach. He's a life coach. He's sharing his message, and it's all positive. I'm going to entertain you. I'm going to make you laugh. I'm going to piss you off. I'm going to talk wrestling, football, and everything in between on face value. But today, we got the knowledge. So this is Build DeMott. I'm the Build DeMott experience. Wait a minute. Reverse that. I'm Bill DeMott. This is the Bill DeMott experience. Do what you say what you mean what you do. I'm out.
Visit VinceRussoBrand.com to sign up for exclusive VIP content. You get over 20 new video shows monthly, including Vixens Who Rule and The Swerve, where Vince Russo interviews stars in wrestling and beyond. Listen to Vince and Jeff Lane discuss weekly news and rumor and review Attitude Era Raws. Also, watch the cult hit Bucket Full of Chicken next. Go to VinceRussoBrand.com and click the red subscribe button to join now.